Hi everyone, and welcome to Comcare's information session on understanding your 2026-27 premium. I'm Sarah Donoghue, Senior Director in Claims Management Group here at Comcare, and I'll be your host for today's event. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are virtually meeting today. I'm joining you from Melbourne, so I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm on today. I would like to pay my respect to their elders, past and present, and acknowledge the contribution they have made and continue to make. I also extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians and Torres Strait Islander people who are present. Before we begin, I'll go through a little housekeeping. This session is being recorded, however, only myself, the presenters, and the slides will be captured in the recording. This recording will be made available on our website in the coming weeks. You'll notice that your microphone and camera are not able to be turned on. The chat function is enabled, and we encourage you to participate in the conversation via the chat, which will not be included as part of the recording. As always, we ask that you keep it respectful and on topic. If you're using the Microsoft Teams app, there are instructions on the screen now on how to turn off chat notifications during this session, which you might otherwise find distracting. I'll also point out now we will have a few polls later on where we will ask for your participation, as well as a short survey that will be emailed to you. This feedback is valuable to us, and we would appreciate you taking 2 minutes at the end of the session to complete while it's still front of mind. I'd really like to thank you for making the time to come along to today's information session. Today we'll hear from Taylor Fry and Comcare about the 2026-27 financial year Comcare premiums. First up, we have Ash Evans from Taylor Fry, Comcare's independent actuary, talking to us about liability and the premium pool. Then we'll have a few short Comcare sessions. We'll first hear from Hanson Chen, Director of the Premiums and Cost Recovery Team, who will take us through the premium process and the key drivers of premiums. Followed by Lockie Vivian Taylor, General Manager of Claims Management Group, who will discuss the key observations, trends, and initiatives seen in the claims space. We will then have Lynn Gunning, Director from the Education and Engagement Group, who will address some of the key actions that your agencies can take to manage premium costs and positive workers' compensation claim outcomes. To finish up, we'll have some time dedicated for Q&A with our panel. We'll be answering some of the common questions received during the registration process. I'd like to acknowledge all the questions that have been received during the registration process. These have helped shape today's information. If you still have further questions after today's session, we will leave contact details for you at the end as well. To get us started, I would like to welcome Ash Evans. Ash is a principal at Taylor Fry and has joined us for these events in the past, providing valuable insight and information about the premium landscape. Thanks for joining us again this year. Over to you. Thanks, Ash.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. As mentioned, I'm Ash Evans. I'm the independent scheme actuary to Comcare. I'm a principal at Taylor Fry, and I'm the warm-up act for Hanson, Lockie and Lynn. And nothing says warm-up act like actuarial statistics. So I come up front. Those who've visited us in previous years, it's going to look pretty similar. I'll take a little bit of a detour. I've added some new material in there, but by and large, what I'm going to be providing you today is a sort of a 30,000 foot view of the premium, the drivers of the premium, then we'll touch on outstanding claims liability and the financial sustainability of the scheme. My perspective is a very long-term perspective. The actuary's job is to look forward and look forward a very long way. We're talking in Comcare under the SRC Act, a scheme where we're forecasting payments decades into the future, not years. So with that, and my role here is to help us zoom back out to make sure from a premium perspective that we're collecting what's needed in the coming year to meet the needs of all those injured in that year, from the time they're injured all the way through to retirement and beyond. So what does the premium look like for 26-27? We've advised Comcare a central estimate premium rate of 1.03% of wages. That is crossed the 1% for the first time in a little while, although historically it has been above 1% once or twice. But you can see here in this chart where we show the premium rate year on year for the last 6 years. You see that we've been on a pretty steady increase over those 6 years from what was a low point in around 21, 22. What's happened since that time is we've seen return to work, some of the gains in return to work back off a little bit, but primarily what's happened between 21, 22 and the most recent year is we've really seen an increase in psychological disease claims coming in. And despite we get something of an offset with a reduction in physical injuries, psychological disease claims do cost significantly more on average than a physical injury. And as such, by receiving more and more of them each year, which we'll look at in a little bit more detail, it has put upward pressure on our break-even premium, which is the amount we think needs to be collected in order to satisfy Comcare to satisfy its obligations to injured parties in 26, 27. For comparison, the right-hand side there, what I've done is I've compared to other schemes. So you can see at 1.03% of wages for the scheme overall. Obviously, individual agencies, their premium reflects their experience, so there is some difference, but overall Comcare premium rate it is materially lower than other jurisdictions, although it's expected to be so. While this comparison can be useful at the surface, it is worth calling out that Comcare itself has different industries. Certainly there's far more hazardous injuries on average in some of the state schemes than there are in the Comcare scheme, which is predominantly, not entirely, but predominantly white collar. But still putting that 1.03% in the context of those, around the grounds around Australia, I think can be quite useful for understanding the premium that faces yourselves as agencies. So let's take a look at that premium and what makes up that premium at a really high level. So what I'm going to do here is take the premium each year and say what percentage of it is contributed by, firstly, injury and physical disease, incapacity and medical payments. That's that bottom area we see here, the chart, by psychological disease, incapacity and medical payments, which we see in this middle area, and in the top area there, that's other payment types, permanent impairment, legal costs, and various scheme management expenses. These are the main components, or all the components of the premium. And what you can see really clearly here as we move from left to right, and the rightmost being the most recent premium, is that psychological disease claims now make up the majority of the premium. The cost of incapacity and medical payments for those with psychological disease claims is the majority of what's being paid by premium payers, making up now 51%. This is not to say they're the majority of claims. We still receive and accept and activate far more claims related to physical injuries, injury and physical disease, but psychological disease claims are far more costly. They're on average around 5 times the size of an injury and physical disease claim size. So as such, despite fewer in number, they're making up the majority of the premium. With that, it does raise the question for us, well, what might be driving this? So from the actuarial perspective, from the top down, we can see some trends, but you all on the ground probably see what's going on a bit more closely, and hopefully what we're about to show up here rings true. To try and understand and show the drivers of this premium, what we've done here is for each acceptance year, from 2020 to 2025, we show the number of psychological disease claims being accepted. And what we're splitting them down by is reported mechanism of injury. So if we focus on 2020 for the moment, in 2020 we had 39 claims where the mechanism of injury was exposure to traumatic event, and 7 claims where it was exposure to violence and harassment. So various types of injuries come out of that, but you can imagine, for instance, our PTSD claim cohort often come via these mechanisms. Moving up, another mechanism of injury is work pressure, 49 in 2020, and 102 workplace harassment and or workplace bullying claims in 2020. That was actually down on the previous year, not shown here, and 34 in another group. So there's a variety of other mechanisms that make up a smaller number. So in 2020, while not the majority, the largest individual contributor in terms of mechanism to psychological disease claims was workplace-related harassment and or workplace bullying. If we look at how this has evolved over the last 6 years, the picture is quite stark. So most of the mechanisms here have grown at least a little bit. But let's keep in mind that the Australian Public Service has also grown a little bit over this time. So all else equal, we'd probably expect a little bit of growth. However, what's particularly stark in the growth that we've seen in the last few years is the number of work pressure related mechanisms. So we're going from, in 2020, 2021, of claims accepted, around about 50, maybe just above, claims related to work pressure. In 2025, we had nearly 3 times the number of claims across the APS related to work pressure. As I said, psychological disease claims are particularly large. That type of movement is driving the premium increase that we saw earlier. And I think one of the helpful things in sort of drilling down in this way and understanding it, it sort of starts asking the question, and I guess the challenge back to you all is to understand, well, what might be causing that in my agency and what can be done about it? Because certainly unabated, this sort of trend will continue to put upward pressure on the premium. So here's where I go on a little bit of divergence. I'm about to show something that I haven't shown in previous years, but I actually wanted to take that idea about, what can I do about it, and turn it into something financial, because I'm an actuary and everything becomes something with a dollar sign in the front of it ultimately. So to start thinking about how influencing a claim, how preventing a claim or getting someone back to work, how does that translate to a financial benefit? And by financial benefit in this instance, I mean, how does it translate to a premium? So I'm going to preempt some of the great work that's going to be presented to you by Hansen and Lockie and Lynn, and just talk really briefly about how psychological disease claim, how that affects a premium. So the premium seems complex, but at its basis level, it's actually quite simple. The premium is a reflection of an agency's experience. How quickly it responds to an agency's experience depends on really the size of the agency and how many claims it's get. Agencies with very few claims, the premium responds quite slowly because you're never quite sure about whether it's an anomalous experience or just unlucky, or whether it's something systemic. Whereas larger agencies respond quite quickly to changes in behaviour. That means that it also responds quite quickly to initiatives that are successful. And very specifically, the premium is responding to both past and expected future costs of every accepted claim. That expected future costs is the main game. So while you may think about in the short term, you've received a psychological disease claim, it's been off work for 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks on, that's not the cost that's affecting the premium. The cost that's affecting the premium is for every week that psychological disease claim is on incapacity, the amount of time it will spend on incapacity in future is increasing. And it's actually increasing exponentially. It increases very quickly because the longer someone's off work, the longer they're likely to remain off work. The more costly the type of claim, as I said, psychological disease claims 5 times the size of an injury and physical disease claim. The more costly the type of claim, the more benefit there is in reducing the incident incidence of that type of claim or getting that employee back to work really quickly. The premium reflects experience. So when experience improves persistently, the premium responds accordingly. So I thought I'd sketch out an illustration. Now we have to be a bit careful when we sketch out illustrations. No, there's no such thing as an average psychological disease claim. Everyone is unique, different expectations. But for the sake of illustration, let's think about an average accepted psychological disease claim. Our expected value, present value, including investment returns, everything else, our expected value of a psychological disease claim, the cost that it will be in future, is $370,000 at acceptance. Some return quickly, but many psychological disease claims remain on incapacity benefits till retirement. $370,000. Plus managing that claim, we're talking about over $400,000 in cost for an average psychological disease claim. Experience is the premium. Premium will ultimately adapt to this. For large agencies, quite quickly. For smaller agencies, a little bit slower. But that amount, over $400,000, directly impacts the premium. Preventing one average psychological disease claim each year reduces the premium by that amount, more than $400,000. It would need to happen year on year. That's each year. But if you have $400,000 less cost coming through on a consistent basis, there'll be $400,000 less. The premium seems complicated, but under the surface, it's a very simple beast. And actually returning someone to work quickly, durably, has really similar impact. If we return one average psychological disease claim to work quickly each year, that also reduces premium by a similar amount. If a psychological disease claim comes in and the average expectation is a $400,000 cost to it, but due to quick and effective return to work, it's a couple of weeks incapacity and not much more, that saving, again, if sustained over time, has that sort of impact on the premium. Aware I'm running close to time here, so I'm going to skip past my last point here, which took a little bit further, and that was already quite a bit to digest. So I might just leave this and note that maybe that's something we talk about at the Comcare National Conference on the 14th to the 16th of September. Everyone should come along. What else is affecting the premium besides psychological disease claims? Well, we've focused necessarily on the things that you have some control over, certainly not all control, but you have some influence over at the very least. There are things that we just can't control. We wish we could, but we can't. And the biggest ticket item in that category at the moment is economic conditions. Unless you've been living under a rock, you'll know that economic conditions have been quite volatile in recent years. Between last year's session here, when we sat here, and now certainly there's quite a bit that's gone on that has affected inflation in particular, but also discount rates. And it's just worth calling out that your premium is affected by these numbers. If inflation increases by 1%, your premium, because we're setting a premium to allow for payments that occur many years in the future, inflation bites. A 1% increase in inflation results in about a 6% increase in the premium. Conversely, a 1% increase in investment returns or government bonds reduces the premium by that similar amount. This is not something we can control, it's not something you can control, but it is worth calling out that the premium that needs to be collected to meet future needs of claimants varies depending on how the market views inflation and how the market views investment returns. And then to round out the picture, beyond the premium, the other thing that we spend most of our time looking at is outstanding claims liability and funding. So if premium is the amount we need to put aside for injuries in the coming premium year, 26-27, the outstanding claims liability is the amount we're saying still needs to be put aside for injuries that have happened in past injury years. These are the amounts that we've collected premiums for previously, but we're constantly reassessing about how much that will be based on experience, about how much money is needed. Our most recent estimate for the outstanding claims liability as at the 30th of June 2026 is just shy of $2 billion. This brings into question and raises the question on the financial sustainability of the scheme. It's really important that workers' compensation schemes have enough money in order to meet those obligations. We're saying there's about $2 billion, just under $2 billion worth of future obligations that Comcare has. And to look at the sustainability of the scheme, we focus then on the funding ratio. Well, how does that liability that Comcare has compare to the assets? And as at 30 June 2026, we forecasted that the funding ratio will be in the vicinity of 110%, and that means assets cover about 110% of that outstanding claims liability provision. It's worth calling out that that's the lower end of the target range for Comcare in terms of financial sustainability, keeping enough assets to be able to meet those future obligations. So that was a bit of a whirlwind, but the key takeaways, we have seen an increase in premium. It's been going on a couple of years. This year is no exception. We've breached that 1% mark, but still trending up. It is very clearly driven by psychological disease claims. Under the hood, we're seeing across the board the mechanisms of psychological disease claims and those claims received increasing, but that workplace stress item, that work pressure item is particularly confronting in the most recent years. And if we think ahead about the expansion of the APS and policies around that, it'll continue to be an area we focus on. But importantly, from our perspective, and hopefully from your perspective, there's a real incentive there to do something about it from a premium perspective. We talked about that over $400,000. Those types of numbers, by continually getting one fewer average claims in, by getting one person back to work, really makes intervention a potential great investment with a really good ROI. And with that, I will hand to Hansen to take this on further. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ash. That was a great warm-up act. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Hansen Chen. I'm the Director of Premiums and Cost Recovery at Comcare. Today, I'll be running through an outline of the premium process, as well as some of the key figures for the 26-27 premium. So firstly, a little context. Comcare is a long-tailed scheme. So the scheme is geared towards payments of benefits for the life of an injury, for as long as that injury impacts the employee. A direct implication resulting from such a scheme is that a key driver of costs in the scheme is payments for time off work. These incapacity payments make up around 2/3 of the total cost to the scheme. The other two key drivers of premium are prevention and return to work. Both are critical levers in managing the sustainability of the scheme. The more that is done to prevent injuries and to return those injured back to work is not only a good outcome for employees, but also necessary for lowering the cost of the scheme for employers. With that context in mind, let's look at the 2026-27 premiums. So the 26-27 average premiums have increased from 0.9% to 1.03% of payroll. As Ash previously mentioned, this increase is primarily due to a higher frequency of psychological injury claims, and slightly offset by lower projected administration costs and changes in economic forecasts. As you'll see throughout this webinar, psychological injury claims continue to remain a key pressure point for the scheme. However, I do think it's worth noting that whilst cost pressures exist, Comcare's premium remains the lowest across Australian and New Zealand jurisdictions. Now, many of you have seen this slide previously. It shows average premiums over the past decade overlaid by claims frequency. If you look at the green line, which are psychological injury claims frequency, a persistent theme has been that the incidents have continued to rise. Previously, declines in physical injury and disease have worked to counter that increase, lowering the average premium rate in the process. However, that positive trend has more or less plateaued in recent years, while psychological claim frequency have continued to increase. In fact, if you just look at the recent years, the rate of increase has actually accelerated. Now, if we look at this next chart, the difference between physical injury and disease claims versus psychological is even more stark when you look at the claims remaining on in-cap benefits. Here you can see a steady decline in the stock of injury and physical claims on in-cap benefits over the past decade, while psychological disease claims have continued to trend up. So this is a stock. In fact, the stock of psych claims receiving in-cap now outstrips physical disease and injury combined. This chart really highlights two things. The first of which is that psychological claims have much lower return to work outcomes than injury and physical disease claims and tend to stay on benefits for much longer. And the second point, as a result, they're significantly more costly on average than physical disease and injury claims. So as Ash mentioned, the average psych claim costs 5 times as much as the average physical injury and disease claim. So if we move to the next slide, a little bit about what the 26-27 premium would actually cover. The long-tail nature of claims means that the premium forecast must also include estimates of future payments and investment returns. The premium, as Ash mentioned previously, is designed to fully fund the forecasted lifetime cost of claims arising in the 2026-27 financial year. These include costs associated with time off work, medical and rehabilitation expenses, lump sums for death or permanent impairment, legal services, and also claims administration. Given the long-term nature of the claims, the lifetime actual cost of the 26-27 injuries and diseases will continue to emerge long after the 26-27 financial year has passed. So now a little bit about how the premium is actually calculated. There are 2 key elements in the premium calculation. The first of which is the concept of a premium window. The premium calculation uses accepted claims with date of injury in the last 4 complete financial years. So for this premium cycle, it would be the financial year 2021-22 to the financial year 2024-25. For reference, more information about this window can be found in the claims experience table on the second page of your premiums and regulatory contributions letter. The second element is the lifetime cost of these claims. Lifetime costs are calculated as payments already made plus an estimate of future payments. Comcare uses a statistical case estimates model to calculate the future estimates for each claim that reflect the characteristics of the claim, including injury type, as well as the emerging pattern of benefits paid on each claim. The next few slides will show the mechanics of the calculation. Comcare calculates premiums for your entity as the sum of 2 components. First is the prescribed amount, which is your entity's share of the premium pool. It's calculated by multiplying your entity's prescribed rate by your entity's estimated payroll for that financial year. The prescribed rate is equal to the prior year's prescribed rate adjusted by the pool trend as well as the entity's relative performance. The second component is a bonus penalty, reflecting an adjustment to your entity's contribution to the prior year's premium pool with an additional year of claims data. I'll go over each of these in a bit more detail over the next few slides. So firstly, the pool trend factor. This reflects the total amount for the pool determined by independent actuaries to cover the expected cost arising from the 2026-27 claims. The pool factor reflects changes in the scheme's overall claims trajectory. If the pool trend is less than 100%, this means experience has improved, and this will have a decreasing impact on overall premiums. Conversely, if the pool trend is greater than 100%, this means experience has deteriorated, and this will tend to increase premiums overall. The calculation for the pool trend for 26-27 is 107.3%. Since this is above 100%, we're seeing upward pressure on premiums this year. Looking now at the performance adjustment, this component reflects changes in your entity's incurred cost relative to the overall scheme. The incurred cost rate is used to measure claims performance. A few things to note about the incurred cost rate. Firstly, it only considers reported and accepted claims. Second, it only looks at claims across the premium window, so just the 4 years. And finally, it accounts for lifetime costs using a statistical case estimate. Some of you may have already worked out by combining the impact of the pool as well as your agency's performance relative to the pool gives your agency's overall performance. So the next slide shows a little bit more about performance adjustments and the common drivers. One of the common ones is the premium window moving forward by 1 year. This is actually often the largest driver of premium movements. For example, a high cost year might drop off and is replaced with a new, much lower claims cost year. You would see a lower premium rate as a result. Other drivers include changes in characteristics of existing claims, particularly those in the window, processing of backlogs, delayed claims acceptance. And now onto the bonus penalty. So that's the second part of the premium calculation. Essentially, the bonus penalty revises the prior year's premium with an extra years of claims experience. You can interpret it as a revision based on your entity's performance over the last 12 months. Each entity's share of the prior year's final premium is adjusted by changes in your entity's experience relative to the overall scheme since last year. The bonus penalty enables a fairer allocation of the prior year's premium pool between entities by reflecting changes in claim circumstances, as well as any late receipts of claims information with the 1 additional year of data. The calculation is the difference between the revised and initial prior year's prescribed rate multiplied by the prior year's estimated payroll. The sum of your prescribed amount plus the bonus penalty is your entity's final premium for 26-27. So returning to the topic of the pool, Comcare can apply a discount or loading to the pool, depending on the overall financial health of the scheme. Currently, Comcare has a target range of 110% to 125% for the funding ratio. As many of you would be aware, in the past, where the scheme funding position has been particularly strong and above the range, discounts have been applied to premiums. Equally, further back, when the funding position has weakened in the past, loadings have been applied to maintain sustainability of the scheme. For 2026-27, Comcare has decided not to apply a loading to the premium pool. However, I do want to emphasize that the current funding ratio is sitting at 110%, and while it is within the target funding range, it is now sitting at the bottom of that range. So whilst we consider the scheme to remain appropriately funded at this point in time, future loadings may need to be considered to support the long-term sustainability of the scheme if the ratio further deteriorates. Now, finally, I want to highlight 2 key ways to reduce your entity's future premium rate. The first is to reduce the number of claims by preventing workplace injury and supporting employees to stay well at work. Prevention is always better than cure, and this is doubly true for psychological injury claims. The second is to reduce the cost of claims by returning injured employees back to work as soon as practicable. Payments for time off work make up the largest component of claim costs. Now, we would encourage agencies to reach out to account managers if you require tailored support on these fronts. We also understand that some agencies may wish to explore specific queries regarding their premiums. These can be arranged through your account manager, who can work with you directly to explore your premium outcomes and claims profile in more depth. And with that, I'll now hand over to Lockie, who will walk us through the key observations and emerging trends across the claims data.
Great. Thank you, Hansen. So hi, everyone, and thanks for coming along today. My name's Lachlan Vivian-Taylor. I'm the General Manager of the Claims Management Group at Comcare. And as Hansen said, I'll go through in a little bit more detail some key observations and trends, but then also speak specifically about some work we are doing within Comcare and also claims to support better return to work outcomes within the scheme. So just in terms of this first slide, as discussed by both Hansen and Ash, we are seeing a trend of increasing claims received since the 2020-2021 financial year. Claims received are tracking at 10.5% higher in the 25-26 year to date compared to the same point last year. Claims have continued to increase since a reduced number was received in the COVID years. And as discussed previously, the most prominent is the increase in psychological claims. And if we look at the numbers, 440 claims were received in the 2020-21 financial year compared to 775 in the 24-25 financial year. Psychological claims received are currently 22.6% higher in the 25-26 year to date compared to the same point last year. Another way to look at it is if we look at the incident rate per 1,000 FTE, and in 2021-22, out of the 6.5 claims received per 1,000 FTE overall, 2.2 were psychological claims. And if we compare to the 25-26 year to date, out of the 8.2 claims received per 1,000 FTE, we're now sitting at 4.0 of those were psychological claims. So the scheme has fundamentally changed. And this trend of increased psych claims is significant and creates both a financial and a return to work challenge for the scheme. So if we now move to return to work, the key challenge facing the premium scheme remains psychological claims. There has been minimal change across the board in relation to return to work outcomes in recent years. However, there has been a decline in return to work experience this financial year. And what you're seeing on the screen is a measure of the percentage of accepted claims initially determined within the previous 24 months that has had any return to work achieved. This measure is tracking consistently over 85% for injury and disease claims. However, if we only look at psych claims, it's currently sitting at 54%. So this low return to work rate for psych claims means more incapacity benefits are being paid, and injured employees are not staying at or returning to work. And as we know, as discussed earlier, incapacity benefits are the main driver of claim costs and scheme liabilities. So this highlights the importance of progressing any hours of return to work in a return to work plan, which benefits workplace productivity, the injured worker's sense of purpose, and can have a significant impact on both mental and physical health for that individual. Also, importantly, it results in reduction in ongoing incapacity benefits and has a positive impact on the premium for agencies, departments, and the scheme as a whole. So as employers within the scheme, you are responsible for return to work. You play a critical role in supporting an injured employee to achieve the best return to health and return to work outcome. After a workplace injury occurs, the research is very clear that there is a window of opportunity where the trajectory of a claim or client can be influenced. The two lead indicators supporting this opportunity can be measured: time to first contact and whether the employer provides practical help before the claim is lodged. So if we look at the 2025 National Return to Work Survey, data showed that 77% of workers who were contacted by their workplace within 72 hours were back at work at the time of the survey. And for those who received no contact at all, only 53% were back at work. Workers who received help from their employer before lodging a claim had a 74% rate of return to work at the time of the survey. And for those who did not, their perception that they did not receive that help, only 55% were back at work, and the results were even lower for those with a psychological claim. So the act of having an early conversation and providing practical support does make a difference, and particularly for those with psychological injury. It signals to the worker that the workplace is engaged, their situation is being taken seriously, and that returning is expected and supported. Communication, as we know, builds trust, psychological safety. It aligns expectations and prevents any misunderstandings and setbacks. So organisations that we know that have set early contact as a target, measured it, tracked it, have seen return to work outcomes improve as a result. So another practical thing that we can all do as employers is provide suitable duties early, which supports a return to work. And this is a really important reminder that you don't need to have the perfect fit role for someone to return. A package of suitable duties for an individual can make a real difference in their recovery and a progression to return to work. So remember, as we all know, good work is good for you, and recovery at work is always the goal, and it is the silver bullet in these compensation schemes. For advice and support, we do have a return to work support team whose focus is working with employers like yourselves to strategically and tactically improve return to work outcomes. So please reach out if you do need some support, and we'll provide the details at the end of the session. So look, I thought I'd just touch on some of the things that we are focused on at Comcare and also within the claims management group. So look, we're all about supporting agencies to develop tailored early intervention programs to establish a culture of safety and support, which, as we've discussed earlier, is critical to wellbeing and recovery and return to work. We have a team of injury managers who work closely with both case managers and claims managers to identify the supports available to deliver better return to work outcomes. And for example, they attend case conferences, they liaise with treating health practitioners, respond to queries regarding recovery, rehabilitation and return to work processes, and are always available. In the claims management group, we've got a really strong focus on building the capability of our claims managers. As it was highlighted in the recent SRC Act review report, capability of claims managers and also case managers is critically important in improving the service that we can provide to clients and also driving quality return to work conversations and hopefully improvements in return to work. So as part of that, we've implemented a call quality coaching program, which is really focused on both the service and return to work outcomes. Just some general work I thought I'd touch on. So recently we have updated our certificate of capacity for clients, which is very focused on articulation of what an injured worker can do rather than what they can't in support of return to work planning. And I think this is a really, really important initiative, and we do want to increase the percentage of medical practitioners that are using the new certificate of capacity. So if anything that you all can do to support that uptake would be really beneficial. We are continuing to increase general practitioner capability through compensable health, so some formal training for GPs, and we're piloting that at the moment. And look, we're always engaging with key stakeholders across the scheme. So we host education and engagement events with rehabilitation case managers, workplace rehabilitation providers, mental health practitioners, and senior leaders across the APS. And look, these sessions are generally focused on reinforcing roles and responsibilities, the importance of effective communication, active engagement in the process, and highlight all of the emerging research, case studies, and importantly, examples of best practice. So look, in summary, in Comcare and the claims management group, we have an absolute focus on high quality claims management, on the service that we provide to clients, including yourselves, and delivering better return to work outcomes for individuals within the scheme. And look, just finally, I just wanted to thank everyone for all of the work that you do every day. It is challenging at times. However, it is really, really important, and it makes a real difference to people's lives. So looking forward to working with you all in driving improvements in return to health and return to work outcomes across the scheme. So that's it from me. I'll hand now over to Lynn, who talked through the key actions that agencies can take to manage premium costs. Over to you, Lynn.
Thank you, Lockie. Ash, Hansen and Lockie have all given us some fantastic insights on premium calculations, early intervention and return to work. So I'd like to build on that now and turn to the three most powerful levers agencies have to influence workers' compensation outcomes. So that's prevention, early intervention and effective injury management. To put it simply, preventing harm reduces the likelihood of injury. Early intervention can significantly reduce the human and organisational impact when incidents, injuries or concerns do arise. And effective injury management supports earlier and more sustainable recovery. These are familiar concepts, but they are not always easy to achieve. Each one relies on strong leadership, effective systems and processes, and sustained organisational effort. And importantly, they are enabled by trust and a strong organisational culture. We know this is not a quick fix and improvements take time, but consistent action matters. So over time, it builds capability, it strengthens culture, and it leads to better outcomes. One of the strongest enablers across prevention, early intervention and injury management is manager knowledge and capability. So managers and supervisors are the connection between the organisation and the workers. They play a critical role in creating safe and productive workplaces, in designing good work, identifying issues early, responding appropriately, so this can include early and potentially difficult conversations, as well as supporting workers through recovery. As we've discussed today, psychological injury claims are becoming a significant driver of cost across jurisdictions. That is why building manager capability in psychosocial risk management, psychological safety and good work design, as well as safety leadership, is so important. To support this, Comcare has a range of practical resources available. These are designed to build capability across work health and safety and return to work and are available in formats such as guidance material, e-learns, workshops and webinars. Please keep in mind that these resources support foundational knowledge and capability, but do not represent compliance on their own. The APSC has also developed a manager playbook focused on building a speak up culture. We have added a link to this in the list of resources posted in the chat. If you'd like help identifying the most relevant materials for your agency, we encourage you to reach out to us. One of the areas I wanted to mention, something that's very close to my heart, is good work design. So building work design capability is critical. Following the SMART, the SMART framework, and having good work can help you protect people from psychosocial risks and support return to work outcomes. We've developed practical materials to help agencies understand what good work design is and how to apply it. These include short videos, team talks and webinars, which can support starting conversations with teams to address psychosocial risks and grow wellbeing, performance and innovation. Last week, we delivered a webinar on Smart Work Design Essentials for people leaders. This session discussed how leaders can lead with smart work design to lift performance and protect wellbeing, and provided a practical framework to redesign work using real case studies. This recording is available on our website. We also have upcoming events that you can register to attend. This includes a webinar on the 30th July on words that work, using smart language for better work design conversations. This session will share practical ways and real-world examples to introduce smart in conversations with your team, peers and leaders to really shift the conversation from problems to workable solutions. We also have a 2-hour in-person workshop planned for Monday the 14th of September before the Comcare National Conference. This workshop will help you understand good work design and help you take the first step to designing better work for improved outcomes that are specific and tailored to your own individual work contexts. Comcare has also partnered with Curtin University and the Australian Public Service Commission to embed good work design in the APS Leadership Edge and Management Edge programs, which are a great resource for your managers and leaders and really build on this foundational work. There are links in the chat if you want to look at any recordings or resources I've mentioned, or if you'd like to register for one of our upcoming events. The second key lever is early intervention. One of the most important capabilities an organisation can build is an environment where managers feel confident and supported to respond and engage early when concerns emerge. When managers feel equipped to have constructive conversations early, there is a much greater opportunity to put supports in place before issues compound or become more complex or entrenched. That support might include temporary adjustments, flexibility, coaching, mentoring, training, setting clear expectations, or support from your HR, work health safety or rehabilitation teams. Early intervention is not just about managing claims sooner, it's about building a culture where people feel supported and where organisations respond proactively to ensure that any concerns are not left unspoken. As Lockie mentioned earlier, another important part of early intervention is ensuring workers have access to early supports when they need it. To support this, Comcare has partnered with Beyond Blue on the Before Blue program. Before Blue is a low-intensity behavioural therapy mental health coaching service that supports employees experiencing day-to-day work or life pressures. The program is available for employers within the Commonwealth, primarily APS employees, and currently 23 APS agencies offer the service to their employees. As part of that program, employees work with a dedicated mental health coach across 8 sessions. And the sessions focus on practical skill building towards an identified goal. Participant surveys consistently show strong improvements to mental health, engagement at work, and productivity. So if you're interested in finding out more information about it, visit our website or contact the team by the details that are up there on the screen. The third lever is effective injury management and rehabilitation. Again, psychological safety is really critical. So too is ensuring that case managers, supervisors and other relevant personnel are trained, resourced and supported to respond well. When that capability is in place, organisations are much better positioned to support recovery and achieve earlier, more sustainable return to work outcomes. This benefits both workers and organisations. For your rehabilitation case managers and claims managers, we have dedicated quarterly forums to build on their existing knowledge and share contemporary information. So to bring this together, while premiums are influenced by many factors, one of the strongest long-term investments an organisation can make is in prevention through systems, leadership, capability and culture. I'll now hand back to Sarah. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much, Lynn. Now we'll move into the Q&A session, and I'll invite Ash, Lockie, Hanson and Lynn back to the screen so we can respond to questions received. So some of these questions were sent to us during the registration process, and I think we do have some questions that have been posted in the chat. I think I'll just start with one of the questions that we received via the registration process, and I think this looks like a good one for you, Hanson, but happy for the other panel members to join in. To what extent can departments use compensation data as a leading indicator of psychosocial hazards, and what are the limitations, appreciating that psychological injuries are often complex?
Thanks, Sarah. Look, great question and very pertinent given the trend. I think there are a couple of facets to this question. So firstly, as a data person, I'm of the view that whenever possible, data should always be the foundation of any analysis because it's objective and provides an evidence-based approach to problem solving. Having said that, data should almost never be the only basis for decision making. This is perhaps more true for psychosocial hazards, where not all of the information and science will be reflected in the data. For example, it would be quite difficult to map out an organization's culture with data alone. Second, compensation data, whilst useful, tends to be after the fact It highlights problems that have eventuated. So it's a useful indicator, but a lagging one, and sometimes substantially lagging. Leading indicators are a little bit difficult to come by given the nature of psychosocial hazards. Off the top of my head, things like well-designed poll surveys could fall into that category. But as I said, they're very difficult to come by. So it's a very difficult problem to solve. So summing up, compensation data is lagging, but it's still a very useful indicator. And it should not be used alone in making organizational decisions on psychosocial hazards.
Thanks,
Sarah.
Hanson. Very comprehensive response. Thank you. We might now move on to one of the questions that we received in the chat. This might be one for Lockie. Is Comcare considering changing the acceptance criteria for psychological claims like New South Wales has done?
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, look, the short answer is no. That's obvious. That is a matter for government in terms of any legislative change that happens, and we're certainly not looking at it from a policy perspective. So, and legislation is but one lever that can be pulled to impact on liabilities or outcomes. So, yeah. So the short answer is no. What we can focus on as workers within the scheme is that what I described earlier around that early contact, early intervention, making sure we have a strong focus on capacity for the person, suitable duties, get them back to work as early as possible, safe work, of course, and address the broader issues around work pressures and the other risk factors as well. So, the short answer, no. It is ultimately a matter for government.
That's right. Thanks very much, Lockie. Another one from the registration might be a good one for you, Ash. As a premium paying agency, what are our biggest opportunities over the next 1 to 3 years? Happy for others to join in as well.
That's a good, I might probably pass it on. Because to me, I'm an actuary. I just measure what happens at the end of the day. The smarter people in the room come up with the bright ideas about how to improve things. I think that the key thing, and hopefully took it away from my little detour in my piece, is that actually the reason to invest, I think, is really clear. Like the cost of these claims, particularly the psychological disease claims, is actually really high. And I know Comcare and pointed to a bunch of resources as well, provide those resources and things around how to intervene. Now, often people talk about early intervention. The studies around early intervention are sometimes it's very effective and some not. The program matters. But again, Comcare evaluates these things, and you need to experiment and you need to figure out what works for your particular workforce and your way of working. But what is clear that when a program works, it can work really well. Not to reveal anything, but there are agencies that have very clearly had very successful early intervention programs that has had the impact of reducing premium ultimately, and return to work programs. These things do exist. If you put in the legwork, at the end of the day, besides making a healthier workforce, they do drive the premium down. And the beauty, I think, of programs in the psychological disease space, it's a very tricky space, but it's also a space where you sometimes get 2 for 1 in that prevention, the environment in which you're improving prevention is also the environment in which you're improving return to work. So the programs that you put in place for a mentally healthier workplace often impact both your return to work rates as well as that prevention rate. And I see this in various schemes across Australia and various employees across Australia. So all I'd encourage is that there's clear money there on the table to be saved, and a justification for investment. And perhaps Lynn or Lockie or Hanson would want to talk about exactly what that program is like.
I might just say, I think, when we can see that work pressure and some of that interpersonal conflict, harassment type ones are rising, leaning into our manager capability and really being able to give them tools to support, adjusting tolerable demands or having those early conversations so that we can, get a bit more clarity and ensure that communication is effective. I think there's some they sometimes sound easier than they are, but I think there's some real ability to invest in some of those things to really work, to really see some benefits. By building that psychological safety across the organisation, often that is a real, a real buffer and a real tool to really help you manage issues earlier.
Thanks, Lynn. Thanks, Ash. I think we've just got time for one more question that came through via the chat, and it is about claims, so it might be a good one for you, Lockie. Has Comcare seen an increase in claims supported by AI? I understand other bodies such as the Fair Work Commission and the Merit Protection Commissioner have publicly stated they have identified a lot of submissions AI, so I wondered if Comcare are also experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good question, and we've certainly certainly been aware of that, particularly the use of AI in fraud and drawing up workers' compensation claims. So, look, we are aware of it. I think broadly across the APS, we're looking at AI as a broad concept and making sure that we utilise it in a safe and effective way. I'm sure potentially some people in the room, there's lots of questions at Senate estimates around artificial intelligence. So it's use within the organisations, but then also how it is used to submit claims as well. So I don't have an exact answer on that, but we are aware of it, and we're certainly looking into it to make sure that we can. Claims are appropriate. Claims are real people, and their decisions are made appropriately as well. So, but yeah, it's a good question, and it's certainly something we're going to turn our mind to, particularly over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thanks, Lockie. So that brings us to the end of our session. So thank you, Lockie, Lynn, Hanson, and Ash for your presentations and the QA session. In wrapping up, we've covered how Comcare premiums are calculated and key drivers, scheme trends and the impact of claim outcomes, the importance of prevention, early intervention, effective injury management and rehabilitation, responses to common questions, and we've also mentioned a range of resources available to support you and your organisation. Before you go, we invite you to take a moment to share your responses to the 2 poll questions now on your screen. It would help us understand how today's session has supported your understanding of premiums and the steps your agency can take. We would also greatly appreciate you taking the time to complete the short survey that we will email out to you. It's also available by scanning the QR code on screen, and there is a link in the chat. I also encourage you to stay up to date by subscribing to eNews and following Comcare on LinkedIn. That way you'll be notified as we develop and release the latest research, resources and upcoming events and engagement opportunities. Looking ahead, our national conference in September will provide an opportunity to hear from experts and share better practice. The Comcare National Conference is Comcare's flagship event and will take place from the 14th to the 16th of September 2026 in Canberra. This year's conference theme centres on a people-first approach to workplace health and safety. We're really excited to share some news about our keynote speakers, Elena Dokic, Mitch Brown, and 2025 New South Wales Australian of the Year, Kath Kershell. They'll be joining us to share their stories. We will also be joined at the conference dinner by television presenter and former AFL player Tony Armstrong. Early bird ticket prices are available now until the 31st of July, so don't miss out on great savings. Otherwise, before we wrap up today, if you have any further questions following today's session, you can also connect with our employer account management team for guidance and support. Thank you again for attendance today. Stay safe and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.